If you asked people around the world what Jesus looked like, you would not get one answer. You would get many. In Europe, he is often shown with light skin and long hair. In Ethiopia, he looks African. In China, he has East Asian features. So which one is true? Here is something most people never notice. The Bible never tells us what Jesus looked like. Not his height, not his face, not his skin, not his hair. That silence is not random. In this series, we are going to examine every clue Scripture gives us about his appearance and compare it with history, art, and science. If you want to follow this journey, subscribe not to miss the next chapter. Let's take a journey around the world. As the message of Jesus moved across continents, something remarkable happened. Every culture began to express him in a way that felt familiar. This was not an attempt to change who he was. It was a way of understanding him. The message stayed the same. The visual language changed. The earliest images of Jesus look very different from what most people imagine today. In the Roman catacombs, from the 2nd and 3rd centuries, he is often shown as a young man, sometimes without a beard, with short hair. These images are simple and closely connected to everyday life. There was no single standard face. That would come later. A more recognizable image of Jesus began to take shape in the Byzantine Empire. Here, artists developed the image known as Christ Pantocrator, meaning ruler of all. This is where the familiar features became established: long hair, a beard, and a direct frontal gaze. These icons were not intended as realistic portraits, but as expressions of theological meaning, presenting Christ as eternal and divine. From Byzantium, this visual form spread across the Orthodox world. Later, during the Renaissance, artists such as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael reinterpreted this image using the ideals of classical beauty. This is the version of Jesus that became widely recognized across Europe and, over time, much of the world. In Italy, the Renaissance transformed everything. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael reimagined Jesus with the soft features, flowing hair, and classical beauty of Greco-Roman sculpture. Travel north to Ireland, and you find something completely different. In the 9th century Book of Kells, Jesus appears with unkempt curly red hair and bright green eyes. He looks like a quintessential Irishman, a Celtic chieftain rather than a Middle Eastern rabbi. In Germany, artists like Matthias Grunewald painted Jesus at his most broken. The Eisenheim altarpiece shows Christ on the cross with twisted limbs, green-tinged flesh, and thorns piercing his skin. It was commissioned for a hospital treating plague victims, and it was meant to tell the dying Jesus suffered too. Now, this one is fascinating. In 17th century Holland, Rembrandt van Rijn did something revolutionary. While every other European painter used Italian or Flemish models, Rembrandt walked into the Jewish quarter of Amsterdam and hired a young Jewish man as his model for Jesus. His series of Head of Christ paintings shows a dark-haired, dark-eyed, olive-skinned man with Middle Eastern features. It was, quite possibly, the most historically accurate Jesus painted in Europe for 1,000 years. In Spain, Jesus became mystical and otherworldly. El Greco elongated his figure into impossible proportions, a Christ who looked like he was being pulled up into heaven. Jesus is also sometimes seen not as an adult, but as a child. The Holy Infant of Atocha shows Christ as a young boy dressed like a pilgrim. He wears a small hat, carries a staff, and holds a basket of food. This image comes from Spanish devotion, where the child Jesus is seen as one who travels to help those in need. In Victorian England, William Holman Hunt painted The Light of the World in 1853. Jesus standing at an overgrown door, holding a lantern, knocking. The door, famously, has no handle on the outside. It can only be opened from within. That painting became one of the most copied religious images in British history. And we can't forget Armenia, the first nation on earth to officially adopt Christianity way back in 301 A.D. Armenian manuscript illuminations showed Jesus with distinctly Armenian features, rendered in brilliant gold and lapis blue. in a tradition unbroken for over 1,700 years. And of course, Russia, where icon painting became a form of prayer. Andrei Rublev, in the 15th century, painted icons so beloved they are now considered national treasures. In Russian Orthodox tradition, icons are never painted. They are written, because they are meant to be read like Scripture itself. Now, let's travel south. And here's something most people don't realize. Christianity in Africa is older than Christianity in most of Europe. Let's start in Egypt. The Coptic Church traces its founding to St. Mark the Evangelist in around 42 A.D., which means Egyptian Christianity is almost as old as the church itself. Coptic icons from as early as the 6th century show Jesus with dark Middle Eastern features and the distinctive large expressive eyes that became a hallmark of Coptic art, eyes meant to gaze directly into the soul of the worshiper. Some of these ancient icons survive to this day in the monasteries of the Egyptian desert. In Ethiopia, Christianity became the state religion in the 4th century, making it one of the earliest Christian nations. For over 1,500 years, Ethiopian Christians have depicted Jesus with African features, including dark skin and traditional garments. Their manuscript illuminations and church paintings form one of the oldest continuous Christian art traditions in the world. These images often show Jesus, Mary, and the apostles with distinctly Ethiopian features and large expressive eyes, reflecting the local artistic style. In what is now Sudan, there were once powerful Christian kingdoms, including Makuria, which lasted for nearly 1,000 years. From the 6th to around the 14th century, Nubian Christians built churches along the Nile and covered them with vibrant frescoes. In the 1960s, before the construction of the Aswan High Dam, archaeologists rescued paintings from Forest Cathedral. These works depict Jesus, Mary, and Nubian saints with distinctly African features, using rich colors and detailed forms. In China, scenes from the life of Jesus were reimagined through traditional painting styles. He is often shown in flowing robes with calm, balanced compositions and soft, natural landscapes. Biblical moments appear in settings that resemble Chinese architecture, with wooden structures and open courtyards. Figures are placed around low tables, wearing garments familiar to the local culture. Clouds, mountains, and gentle brushwork create a sense of harmony, presenting the story in a distinctly Chinese visual language. One of the earliest known images of Jesus was found in the Mogao Caves. Created around the 7th century, it comes from the time when Christianity first reached China along the Silk Road. In this painting, Christ is shown in a style influenced by Buddhist art, with soft features, flowing robes, and a calm, almost meditative presence. It is one of the earliest examples of how Jesus was understood through a completely different cultural lens. In Japan, during the centuries when Christianity was banned, believers developed hidden forms of devotion. Jesus was not always shown directly. Instead, sacred figures were adapted into familiar forms, often blending with local artistic traditions. Some images present a figure resembling Mary in the style of Buddhist statues, known today as Maria Canon. Through this visual language, the presence of Christ was preserved in a way that could be recognized by believers, while remaining hidden to others. In India, Christian tradition holds that the Apostle St. Thomas brought the gospel in the 1st century, but the way Jesus was seen here did not stay the same. Over time, his story was retold through local culture. In 1616, Thomas Stevens wrote the Christs of Peru. It presented the story of the Bible in the style of Hindu Puranas, using familiar language, imagery, and ideas to explain Christian beliefs. In Mughal manuscripts, the life of Christ appears in rich colors and detailed courtly settings. The scenes follow the gospel, but the visual style reflects the world of Indian empires. In other traditions, Jesus is placed within local landscapes. He is shown with softer features, in clothing that feels closer to the people around him, sometimes as a child, sometimes as a teacher, sometimes as a shepherd. The settings change, the artistic language changes, but the story remains the same. One message, seen through many cultures. In the Philippines, One of the oldest images of Jesus is the Santo Niño, the Holy Child. It has been venerated since 1521, when Ferdinand Magellan brought it to Cebu. In Filipino devotion, the child Jesus is dressed as a king, crowned, robed, and honored with deep reverence. Every year, this devotion comes alive during the Sinulog festival, where millions gather in celebration. Separately, another powerful devotion centers on the Black Nazarene, a life-sized image of Christ carrying the cross marked by suffering and devotion. During the annual Traslación, millions join the procession, hoping to touch the image. Different images, different traditions, but the same deep faith. In Indonesia, one of the most unique depictions of Jesus is found at Ganjuran Church in Java. Here, Christ is portrayed as a Javanese figure. He has local features, wears traditional dress, and is sometimes shown like a king, calm, composed, and deeply rooted in the culture around him. Other communities blend global traditions with local expression. Icons follow ancient Christian forms, but are painted by Indonesian hands with Indonesian color and style. In Malaysia, images of Jesus reflect both global Catholic tradition and local culture. In many churches, he is shown as the Divine Mercy, with red and white rays flowing from his heart, a symbol of grace and forgiveness. Other depictions focus on the Sacred Heart, emphasizing love and sacrifice, often through detailed statues placed close to the faithful. Inside Malaysian churches, Western biblical scenes appear alongside bright colors, tropical light, and local design elements, creating a unique atmosphere. Vietnamese Catholic art often blends universal Christian themes with local culture. For example, Christmas nativity scenes in Vietnam commonly depict the infant Jesus in caves or grottos rather than stables, reflecting a tradition dating from at least to the mid-20th century that Jesus was born in a cave. The famous 32-meter Christ of Vung Tau statue is a modern testament to Vietnamese devotion. The statue rises over 30 meters tall, with arms outstretched toward the horizon. From a distance, it dominates the coastline, a global symbol seen through a local landscape. In Thailand, one of the most distinctive images of Jesus can be seen at Holy Redeemer Church. Here, Christ is often shown in radiant gold, standing with both hands open. This posture is intentional as it expresses welcome, peace, and blessing, rather than authority or distance. In Thai culture, where gestures carry deep meaning, open hands communicate generosity, calm presence, and a willingness to give. Instead of a distant figure, Jesus is presented as someone approachable, present, and close to the people. In Mexico, Jesus is seen in very different ways. Across Mexico and Central America, many sanctuaries are devoted to the Cristos Negros, dark wooden crucifixes, blackened over time by age, smoke, and devotion. One of the most famous stands in Esquipulas, carved in the late 16th century and visited by pilgrims to this day. Then there is the Niño Dios, the child Jesus. In many homes, families keep a small figure and dress him each year for Candlemas. These images show a personal and intimate connection, not distant, but part of daily life. And in Atotonilco, an entire church is covered in murals of Christ's life. Every wall tells the story, turning the space into a visual gospel. In almost every Colombian home, taxi, and corner shop, you'll find him, the Divino Niño, a small child in a pink robe with his arms stretched open. In 1935, an Italian priest named Father Rizzo walked into a religious art shop in Bogota. The shopkeeper showed him a statue of the infant Jesus, crucified, nailed to a tiny cross. Father Rizzo looked at it and said, "So little, and already you want to crucify him?" He told the artisan, "Take the cross off, change the face." And the artisan carved a new face, modeled on his own son. That's the Divino Niño, just a boy with his arms open, asking to be held. 35,000 people visit his shrine in Bogota every Sunday, but travel south to the town of Buga, and Jesus looks completely different. In 1573, an indigenous woman pulled a tiny crucifix from a river small enough to hold in one hand. By morning, they say, it had grown. When a bishop tried to burn it in 1605, it wouldn't catch fire. Instead, the skin of Christ turned black. 400 years later, 3.5 million pilgrims a year come to kneel before it. And behind both of these living devotions stands a painter most of the world has never heard of, Gregorio Vázquez de Arce y Ceballos. Born in Bogotá in 1638, never left Colombia, painted over 500 works of Christ and the saints for the churches of his city. He learned from European engraving shipped across the Atlantic, but softened the faces, warmed the skin, gave Jesus an emotion and vulnerability that was unmistakably his own. He died in poverty in 1711. Colombia calls him its greatest artist. In 1953, sculptor Gilma Madera won a national competition to build a Christ for Havana. She traveled to Italy and carved him from massive blocks of white Carrara marble. She did not follow the traditional European model. Instead, she created a figure that feels grounded, human, and close to the people. Some say his face looks distinctly Cuban. His expression is calm. His gaze is simple, almost neutral, yet from across the city, it feels like he is looking directly at you. Inside the home, Jesus takes on a different presence. The Sacred Heart, that familiar image of Christ with his heart visible and burning, is placed close, often among candles, family photographs, and everyday objects. The heart represents love that remains open even when it is rejected, a love that suffers, endures, and continues to give. In the United States, two very different images of Jesus shaped how millions imagined him. At the beginning of the 20th century, Henry Ossawa Tanner painted Christ with realism, shadow, and quiet emotion. His Jesus feels human and deeply present, often surrounded by darkness and soft light. Then, in 1941, Warner Salmon created Head of Christ, a soft, focused portrait of Jesus with light brown hair, a trimmed beard, and a gentle upward gaze. That image spread everywhere, on prayer cards, Bibles, calendars, church walls, and family homes, becoming one of the most reproduced images of Jesus in modern history. For many Americans in the 20th century, this became the familiar face of Jesus. In New Mexico, the Apache Christ icon at St. Joseph Apache Mission presents Jesus in the cultural context of the Mescalero Apache. He is depicted as a native figure associated with the landscape of Sierra Blanca and elements of local tradition, such as moccasins and a ceremonial rattle. The image also includes Apache words often translated as giver of life. In Peru, Jesus survived the earthquakes. In the 1600s, an enslaved Angolan man painted Christ on a simple mud wall on the outskirts of Lima. Nobody imagined the image would become one of the most important in South America. Then the earth began to shake. Churches collapsed, buildings cracked apart. Thousands died, but the painted wall remained standing. People called the image Señor de los Milagros, the Lord of Miracles. And today millions still follow the dark Christ through the streets of Lima every October beneath clouds of incense and purple banners. And high in the Andes, inside Cusco Cathedral, another dark Christ became the protector of a city. They call him Señor de los Temblores, the Lord of Earthquakes. When a devastating earthquake struck Cusco in 1650, people carried the crucifix into the streets and prayed as the city trembled around them. According to tradition, the shaking stopped. Nearby hangs one of the most unusual Last Suppers ever painted. In 1753, Quechua artist Marcos Zapata painted Christ, and the apostles gathered not around lamb, but around roasted guinea pig, corn, and Andean food from the mountains of Peru. In New Zealand, there is a church where Jesus appears to walk on water. Inside St. Faith's Anglican Church in Rotorua, a famous etched window shows Christ standing above Lake Rotorua wearing a korowai, the feathered cloak of a Māori chief. And because the real lake sits directly behind the glass, the water becomes part of the image itself. From the right angle, Jesus seems to step across the lake toward the people inside the church. What we see in the face of Jesus across all of these cultures is not a contradiction. It is a reflection of how widely the message of Jesus has reached. Every culture that encountered the gospel expressed it in their own language, their own art, and their own identity. And the Bible reminds us where our focus should be. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. What matters is not how Jesus was painted, but what he did. If you want to explore what the Bible and history actually tell us about his appearance, that is what we look at next. Subscribe so you do not miss it.